Up top. Maybe I should, maybe a little more me and a little less him. How's that look? All right. So AM Answers. Welcome to AM Answers because it's the AM and I'm going to be giving answers, and that's why it's called AM Answers, and it's very exciting. So before we get into it, while you guys get in here, I just want to share with you guys. I had this idea of something to talk about today. I got all the streams up. So I recorded this podcast last week that was called The Longevity Blueprint that I think is coming out like spring of next year or something. But at the end of the podcast, they asked me, I don't know exactly how it was phrased. What is your like secret for achieving longevity, or like what is the most important thing in achieving longevity? Because that's like the whole vibe of the podcast, right? And I answered something that the host is like, wow, nobody's really ever answered like that before. Because I think most people usually answer like a specific type of thing that's like good for your health is the answer. And my answer had nothing to do with that. My answer was about, and the reason I'm sharing with this with you guys is because I think it applies to everything. I use it for everything in life, this sort of concept. And so if you guys are trying to get healthier, trying to figure out your house situation, trying to whatever, figure out your budget for Christmas, like whatever it is, this is kind of it. And it's remove any of the barriers that keep you from doing something, right? So like the whole thing of this was, in terms of longevity, it's like the whole point of longevity is it's a long game. It's always called longevity, right? Like you don't just jump in the sauna once and then all of a sudden you have a 60% all mortality reduction rate. Like that's not how it works. It's if you do sauna 4 times a week forever, right? Then that reduces your all-cause mortality rate by 60%. So the tip, like the thing was, most of us come up with excuses not to do something, and not because we don't want to do it, but because it's too difficult to do it, right? So the secret about people is the easier you make it for someone to do something, the more likely they are to do it. So we are no different than any other person, right? So like in all of our stuff, like the reason I came out with We Inspect Together, which is our app-powered inspection app, right, that I have been talking about, is because it makes it so much easier for you to get the right type of inspection. So everything I'm trying to figure out is how to make it easy and get rid of the barriers. And so my answer was basically, she asked me this question, and it's so funny because I did like all of the biohacking things that day. So I woke up, I was like, here, let me tell you what I did today. And then I promise I'll get to answers, guys. I go, first thing I did, I woke up and I worked out at 5:30. And then I got in the sauna for 20 minutes. So my morning routine, that's what I do every morning. And then I went about my day, worked, made my kids lunch, got them to school, then did work. And then midday, I have another block of time that I block for myself, which is like my lunch hour or whatever. But in that time, I do PEMF mat, and then I do breath work, and then I do red light, and then I do cold plunge. And I do all of that within basically like a 30 to 45 minute window, basically. And so I say, here's all the things I did today. I was like, I'm not saying doing all of these things is a secret to longevity, but the thing is that I never used to do any of these things consistently. And if you don't do them consistently, then nothing is going to work. So what I did, and this is actually something I rolled out, I've tried to help people in the company, like kind of on an individual mentor level with people in our company, is how to time block your day so you don't have to think anymore about doing something, right? So if let's say you work and you go to work and you get all your emails that come in, well, if you're constantly shifting your focus to email and you're not blocking your day, then you're going to feel like incredibly unproductive because you can't ever get in the zone and do what you need to be doing, right? So instead, we time block sections of the day. So I answer emails during this 30 minutes, during this 30 minutes, during this 30 minutes. And from that point on, I don't even look at my emails for the rest of the day, right? And it allows you to focus on what you need to focus on. It takes that barrier, that distraction away from you when you're trying to achieve something, right? So for me, I was having a lot of trouble with these things. I want to be doing all of these health things, and I was having issues with kids and running the business and sleeping and like whatever, right? And so what I did is I said, okay, I don't have to wake up at 4 a.m. like I used to. I used to try to do all of it at once. It's like, if I try to do all of it once, it's too difficult. It's too difficult to wake up. So if it's hard, then I'm not going to do it. So I split it into sections. And in the morning, I just do workout and I do sauna. And so now I could go and I can wake up at 5:30, which isn't terrible. And so I wake up and I do those same things every morning. It's not even a question. So I don't have to think about it. And then during the day, I do my middle block of things every day. It's kind of like that idea of Steve Jobs where he like wore the same outfit every day so he didn't have to think about it, right? It was one less thing to think about. It just made it super fast and easy to get dressed in the morning. You didn't waste time like getting dressed in the morning. So anyways, that was my general concept that I talked about on the show. But I thought it was kind of interesting. I don't feel like I've ever really gotten into that before. So anyways, I don't know if you guys take something for that or if you're just waiting for me to answer questions. But if you liked it, throw a heart so I know that I could talk about other things than just mold all the time. And otherwise, I will start getting questions. By the way, guys, I just threw in my story, hey, thank you for the single heart that said, allow you to talk about something other than mold for a minute. That was for me, guys. That was a little bit for me. The rest is for you guys. I threw something in my story. I threw a question box in there. So if anybody, if I don't get to your question or whatever, throw it in there. I'm going to try to answer them like later today, maybe tomorrow. I'll try to leave them in there. Keep in mind, those answers have to be quicker because it's in a story, so I can't go super in depth on that stuff. So try not to ask like this incredibly elaborate question that I'm not going to be able to answer in 30 or 60 seconds. Okay, so questions, throw them in here, throw them in the chat, get them all going. I'm going to start scrolling through. So the first one I see here, after remediation, is there an acceptable amount of mold on air testing that is, or mold on air testing? This is an unfinished basement with a sump pump. Okay, so I've done a pretty deep dive into sort of post-inspection testing in different podcasts. I want to say there is a podcast episode in the 80s that is talking about post-remediation and testing and all this stuff. So I'll try to go quick on this. When you're doing air testing after a remediation, your containments are still up. And the air scrubbers that are in there have probably been running. So if your air sample fails, a test in a containment where the air is being cleaned constantly, it's kind of a massive fail, really, when you think of it that way, because they're constantly cleaning the air. The acceptable amount, the idea here is that you have your outside baselines, you have your inside, and you want your inside to be less than your outside. That's the general concept of this. When you're doing remediation, the inside should be a lot less than the outside because you're constantly cleaning the air. But guys, that is not the most important part, okay? The most important part when you're doing remediation, you're doing testing afterwards, is not testing the air. You need to do it, but that's not the most important part because when remediation happened, you didn't get your remediator in there and have them sign a contract that said, I'm going to remove mold from the air. Their contract was to remove mold from this wall or this ceiling or whatever. You have to do surface level testing on the remediated areas to make sure that they actually remove the source of mold growth that is on that stuff. So what does that mean? If you pull off a wall, there's framing behind, right? There's 2x4s, there's different things like that, right? So they actually have to remediate that stuff, and you will be swabbing the 2x4s to make sure they actually did their job. Now, the air sample is important because when you rip out a wall, you aerosolize stuff and you do create more of a little mold explosion in your contained space. So you do have to be cleaning the, sorry guys, I forgot to mute all my stuff. You do have to be cleaning the air. That's what the air scrubber is doing. But that isn't the most important part. So if you're only evaluating off of that, and here's what I will say is that most local inspectors are only going to do air samples. They're not going to look at all the other stuff. All right. So, sorry guys, I'm going to pause my notifications really quick. I'm really sorry for that. This is what happens when you just kind of roll in hot in the morning and you're not really planning stuff. I'm like, AM answers, 5 minutes, go. Okay, cool. So I think I'm muted everywhere. Am I muted everywhere? I've got one more spot. I got to focus my phone so I don't get things. Okay, I'm good. Anyways, hopefully that answered that question. But it's important that the surface is happening too. All right, that was Instagram. I'm going to switch over. I'm going to answer so there's a YouTube comment in here. Oh, yay. This was commenting saying that Brantley was okay with me talking about life stuff instead of just mold because it's all part of a healthy life. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Flip over to Facebook. Question over here. By the way, guys, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, like it's everywhere, right? So feel free to go to those other spots. As we start getting into the next year, we're going to start posting different types of content on the different platforms. It's not going to be the same thing everywhere. So if you like more of a YouTube vibe, then like you go over there or whatever, you can get all this stuff. All right, so this question is from Walter. talking about fogging and a specific type of fog. So I've done a pretty long kind of talk through on fog. Quick general concept: fogging on its own without remediation does not ever work. It doesn't matter what you're fogging with, because the most a fog can do is kill something. But if you kill it, it's still there, right? You shoot a person, the person's still there dead on the ground, right? And we know that we can still breed those particles from dead mold colonies and dead spores, and they still trigger all of the same immune responses. So if the purpose of the fogging is to just magically get rid of everything, it doesn't ever work. The purpose of the fog is after what I just described here with remediation. You remediate all the surfaces, you get it all done. The next thing you need to do in remediation, if you think about it, I'll give you a quick analogy. Think mold's like a factory. Okay, say I have a factory behind this wall. Smoke comes out of the top of the factory, right? That's what happens. Let's say I live down the street over here, right on the side. I walk outside and I'm breathing the smoke in. Somebody would maybe say like, hey, you live in a place with a bad air pollution problem because you got all the smoke up here. I'm like, nah, not really. I live in a place with a factory problem. Like, yes, I'm breathing the smoke. That's my direct impact, but the factory is the real problem. It's not it's the core problem, I should say, right? So then what we need to do is we need to shut the factory down, which is the equivalent of remediating and getting rid of source. And the second piece is that all the smoke that came up, we have to get rid of all of that because we're still going to be breathing that, right? And this is happening in our house. So we get rid of the source in the wall, then we have to get rid of the smoke we're breathing. The fogging is geared toward that. And it's not geared toward killing. What it's doing, the question would then be, how do I remove all this fog that's floating around in the air all the time? How do you get rid of it, right? And so the thing is, we have to get it all to a singular place where we can actually extract it. That's what the fog is for. If I got these particles floating around all up over here, the fog is meant to come over here, grab onto them, make them heavier, and have gravity then bring them down to the surface so I can then wipe it away. So that is why you fog. You don't fog to kill anything. You literally fog to get stuff out of the air down to a surface so you can wipe and clean it. Okay, so that's why you fog. So hopefully that's helpful. Is it mold if your toothbrush handle starts to get brown and yellow at some places? Mold, bacteria, I don't know. I would just get a new toothbrush. And this is actually a really interesting question, not for it specifically, but the concept of it, right? I think a lot of times we overthink certain stuff. I have a cleaning guide that I created for how to clean your moldy stuff. If you go to cleanmymoldystuff.com, you can get the cleaning guide. It's free. It talks about how to clean everything from literally everything in your house, where to clean it, how to clean it, what to clean it with, when to clean it, all that stuff. But one of the concepts in there that I roll out is this idea where you have price, so low price to high price, and then you have value, which is sentimental value to high value. Or sorry, excuse me. This is a different one I'm working on. You have what it's made of. So sorry about that, guys. Solid to porous. Okay, so solid, then semi-porous, then porous. And then you have the value of it, so the price. So you have from cheap to expensive. And you kind of create this graph, right? So if we're talking about a toothbrush is basically semi-porous. You have the handle that's more solid, but then the bristles, right? So you would go here, and it would be cheap. And so if you're looking at this graph, stuff that's cheap and questionable, which is your porous, semi-porous stuff, just get rid of that stuff. Like, there's no need to sit here and figure out how to try to fix it because it's not a big expense to get rid of. And by the way, side note, your oral microbiome has a huge impact on your overall immune system and your toxic load and all of that stuff. So the last thing that we want to be doing is putting stuff in our mouth and increasing the possibility of bacteria and other things going on in our mouth if we don't need to. So that was just like a tangent off that question. It's a really interesting question to get into that. So hopefully that helped. What brand or type of swabs do you recommend? So there really isn't a brand or a type. There is they come from the labs, right? It's like if you ordered an at-home health test kit where you had to like swab your cheek. Remember when we all just swab our noses up into our brains when COVID was happening? Like, it's a lab sterilized swab. So it's really what it is, a sterilized swab. If you were working with us, let's say through We Inspect Together, let's say through our app inspection companion, right, where you can literally inspect one single room if you want to with us, then, and a swab was part of it, we would just send you a test kit that had the swab in it. The same as if you got like an at-home test kit for like your gut or something like that. So I wouldn't be worrying about that so much, in terms of what type you get. It's more about like, what are you swabbing and where are you swabbing and why are you doing it? That's where the inspection, the strategy, and the consulting comes in. That's so much more important. So you really need to be thinking about that. Another comment over here about the content stuff. Oftentimes it's more costly to restore something than replace it, which is really, really true as well. All right, so I got a question over here on Facebook. What is the best way to test for molds in an HVAC system, ducts? Oh, and then there's a second part. And a concrete floor in a garage, and a concrete basement wall. So there's a lot of stuff. It's a big, long question. And then how do you clean all this stuff? All right, let me talk about testing for HVAC systems, mold in HVAC systems, because this is a pretty common question. So there are two ways that an HVAC system becomes impacted. The first is that there's mold actually growing in it. The second is that you have mold in your house somewhere, and the smoke that we talked about earlier, which is your cross-contamination, gets pulled up into the HVAC system, gets sucked into your return vents, and it gets in there, and it's the particles and the fragments from colonies and the spores and stuff, but it's not actually growing in your air conditioning system. That is more commonly what happens. I'd say it's probably like 75% that, 25% is actually growing in your system. If you live in southern climates, your frequency is going to change. There's more often that you get mold growing in your system if you live in the south or high humidity areas. But I'd say probably, if I had to average it out anecdotally, you're probably like 75-25. So if 75% of the time your air conditioning system is getting contaminated from cross-contamination, which means particles getting in there, that means when we open the system up, you don't see mold anymore. What you see is what looks like dirt and dust. That's what you see. The problem is that stuff gets moved through your system, gets spit out into your house, and then that's what you breathe, right? And then that's how your secondary exposure comes in. So I call that I like to call that for HVAC systems a secondary source, meaning that it's become so cross-contaminated that it's turned into a source, but it wasn't actually growing there in the first place, right? That's kind of how I envision it. So if you're going to test an HVAC system, and the majority of time you're not seeing mold growing all over it. Side note, if you're seeing mold growing in the HVAC system, it's growing. It's pretty obvious. If you wanted to test it, it would be a basic swab test, but like if you could see it in there, it's not good. So the way you do it is through dust testing. It's really the same concept as how you test your house. It's the same thing, where you do dust collection samples in the house. You could do the same type of dust analysis in your air conditioning. So typically what we do is we open up the air handler units. If we can open where the coil is, that's like a bonus if you're able to. Sometimes they're really locked up and you can't get into them. You might need an HVAC contractor to come open that for you. The coil is where moisture is created in your HVAC system. So like the coil is where the heating and cooling, or where the cooling happens, I should say. So if air comes in and you're trying to cool it, it gets the coil, and then what happens is condensation forms, like on my nifty We Inspect coffee mug. And the dripping happens in the HVAC system. Now in the HVAC system, there's a pan for it. It should be leaving the system. In theory, you shouldn't be getting standing stagnant water in there, which would then create mold and bacterial growth. But sometimes it happens. So it's really nice to be able to get that piece of it open as well, so you can see it. But if you can't see that, then the way that we do it, we do a dust collection sample inside of the air conditioning system. And sometimes we include the ducts, where we'll even take off a couple of the vents and stick our hand up there and collect dust from in there. And we get that analyzed the same way you would do a dust analysis in your house. And that can really show us like the load of mold that's in there. You could even test for bacteria. You could test for all kinds of stuff in that. Mycotoxins you could test for, so all that stuff. All right, so let me see if we got a couple more questions. So it's 9:20. I got about 5 minutes before my morning kickoff with the operation team. So I got to make sure that we're getting in with ops every morning. So the quality of our inspections and our services and everything for you guys are always on point. So every single morning I have an ops kickoff call with our operation director to make sure that everything's on point with you guys. So, okay. So let me see if I could see a couple other ones. By the way, guys, if I'm not getting your question, if you just came in on my story, I posted a question box. You can go in there and I'll try to answer some a little bit later, maybe tomorrow. So I will do that as we go. Okay. This is interesting. Maybe this will kind of get me through the rest. All right. If someone wants to do a remodel, is there a better way to do this given mold concerns? This is a really interesting question. All right. So when you're doing remodels, you're typically doing it in older homes, probably. Even if it's your home, it's older, right? You're only remodeling because it's not cool anymore. The only reason it's not cool anymore is because time has passed and there's new cool stuff. And if there's new cool stuff, then the old stuff isn't so cool. Unless you're like bell bottoms, which then circle all the way back in 30 years and then they're cool again. But I don't know what, side note, tangent. Anyways, so if you are doing a remodel, I've had a lot of clients that are kind of going through this. The first thing that we want to do is, ideally, if you own the house and you're in there, the first thing you really want to do is inspect the area and make sure there aren't visual concerns or potential mold issues, right? So this is where, if you're doing a remodel in your house and you're not necessarily like wanting a full-on inspection of your house, this is where the We Inspect Together app is awesome, right? So by the way, guys, it's yesweinspect.com/together. Just rolled it out last week. Had closed over. I had a limited opening, so I think it's still closed right now. I think we took everyone in, although there might be some availabilities. I'll look real quick and see if we fill them up. But anyways, the cool thing about the app is, let's say you're remodeling your bathroom, then all you would do is you go in the app and you would pick the strategize option, which says, I want to inspect this one room and I want a remediation protocol and consultation afterwards. The reason you would want that is because you're asking these questions about what's the best way to go about a remodel. And so you would we would do an inspection of the room. It's important to know what's happening in the room before you start ripping everything open. Because if you rip it open and there's problems in there, it's too late. You've already spread it all over the place and now you're cross-contaminating your whole house. So it's really important to know what you're dealing with as best as you can before you start demolishing stuff, right? So say you're remodeling a bathroom, you do an inspection of the bathroom, like, hey, it looks like there might be a problem in the wall behind the toilet and maybe like this wall by the shower on the other side or something. And so ideally you test those areas first to know what you're in for, okay? And if there's a problem there, then what you do is you actually remediate before you remodel, okay? You'll contain the space and you'll remove everything. So you'll still demo and remove everything like you would in a remodel, but because you're containing it, you are protecting cross-contamination and spreading it all over the place, which becomes a big concern in remodels. Then you actually remediate whatever's going on in there and you go through that process and then you build it back with the new remodel, right? So I've been in a bunch of places where people are like, oh yeah, I was just redoing the bathroom. We found all this stuff back here. And if you just happen to find it all, then you've already spread it all over the place when you demoed it out. So I would highly, highly recommend, if you're doing a remodel, in particular a kitchen, a bathroom, at least get that area inspected. And now with our app, you can get it done through our eyes and you can get our consult on the back end. So you can understand like what's the best order of events to go through a remodel, right? That's like one really cool use case for the app, which I haven't really thought about until you did. Every time somebody asks a question, I'm like, oh, the app is really good for this. The app is really good for that. It's like so exciting. And just so you guys know, the app isn't just like the app does it for you. The app is basically just using your phone as a window into your house. So my consultants can still see everything and basically guide you on areas that look, like a concern, what to test, we have, consulting that happens afterwards, but it's a way to do it so you don't have to fly my team out there, which is more expensive than really what you would need for like a single room remodel, right? So just the flexibility and the accessibility that's there with this, like, I'm just so excited. So excited. Okay. All right. How to make sure, this is an interesting question. I mean, I don't know how to do this. So this is a Facebook question. How to make sure that your air scrubber that was brought in by your remediation company isn't contaminated. There's really not a way for you to make sure. You need to ask them questions, right? You need to ask them, how are they decontaminating their air scrubbers when they go from one place to the other? At minimum, what they need to be telling you is they're replacing the interior filters that are in there, so they shouldn't be using the same filter from one house to the next. And they should be wiping down the entire thing between jobs. So it should be cleaned before it comes into your place. That's really kind of the minimum that should be happening there. All right, guys, it is 9:25. Is there any more little teeny tiny quick ones? A couple. I love biohacking stuff. I'm going to talk more about this stuff. I do so much of it on my own. What are a couple of your favorite biohacking mold gadgets for mold reducing items in air or vehicles under $200? Ooh, all right. So you're kind of like house hacking in a way here. You're trying to like house hack, not like body hack, but house hack. Under $200. All right. Okay, so I'm not gonna go into like air filtration and stuff because truthfully, the best air filters are all more than $200. If you're really trying to reduce the amount of airborne mold particle you're breathing, you got to get above. You have to get more medical grade stuff, right? So I'm gonna get out of that. 3 things that are really cheap. Air flushing your house. What does that mean? Open your windows and doors 10 minutes in a day. That's it. You'll get a cross breeze and it'll air flush and pull out a lot of stuff that's in your space. So that's one. Number 2, dust cleaning your house, like spring cleaning on steroids of your house more frequently, right? Why? Because dust harbors all of the particles and fragments and mycotoxin fragments and stuff that are settled in your house. So if you get rid of the dust reservoirs, then it's less that will pop up that you will breathe. So it's a combination. The reason you open the windows is because you dilute the air, right? So your dilution. And if you have more dilution, then you have less concentration. That's what that means. So then if you're doing that relatively frequently, then if you're building up a mold issue in the house, then it's not necessarily building up so much because you're diluting it, and then you can do really thorough dust cleaning to get rid of some of those reservoirs. So those are 2 options for you. One last question I have to wrap it up over on YouTube. Is there a pay structure for the app? It sounds amazing, but I'm curious how much it would cost and what kind of workload you can keep with if lots of people need help. Well, so Brandley, let me handle the workload piece. I've got an entire team and a whole structure back here, and I'm also easing into the rollout so we don't overdo ourselves to make sure our quality is on top. So I'm constantly like monitoring like what quantity looks like in terms of availability and how much we're taking on, especially at the beginning, because I want to make sure it's like the best experience. And so far it's been really good. As far as the pay structure, you pay by room. There are 3 different inspection plans that you can get. And the plans are based on the level of service from us that you want. So on the low end, there's no consulting, like phone calls afterwards. There's no remediation plans. It's really just like the visual inspection and a breakdown of what we saw, right? That's kind of the low end. The high end is you get, the inspection and all that stuff, but you also get a phone call consultation with us. You also get full remediation protocols written out. You get priority of events. You get all that. So the inspection plans are based on the amount of involvement that you want from us. And I built it that way because sometimes people are like, I just want like a quick confirmation there's something going on in here. I don't need a whole remediation plan. I don't need a whole this. And so I was like, cool. Well, if there are people that have different thoughts on what they're looking for, then I would rather give them the option to pay a little bit less on the type of inspection they're getting, and they can apply that to maybe a test or something if they have to do a test. So that's how I set it up. So there's 3 different plans. And then you pay for samples individually, and right now they're starting at $89 per sample for source identification samples. So like if I want to test this wall, it's like $89 to test that wall, right? So the way it works is we do the inspection on the plan by room. So you can buy an individual room. Let's say you buy the middle tier, which is $149 to inspect 1 room. We go through the room, we say, hey, we see 1 problem here we think you should test. We would get on a call, walk you through it, show you what's going on. And let's say you're like, yeah, I want to test that. And then 1 test is $89. You pay for that. And then we drop ship the kit to you and you do all the testing and all that stuff. So that's how it works. It's really awesome. Really pumped about it. It's been going incredibly well. And yeah, that's all I got to say. My ops call is right now. I got to go. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you hanging out. Everybody on Facebook and YouTube that's been here too. I know it's newer over here. Thank you guys so much, and for all the interaction and everything as well. Talk to you guys later. See ya.